Hello and welcome to MMAnytts Real Talk. I'm your host, Sebastian Vendel-Martinez, veteran reporter here at MMAnytts. And in this segment, it's basically my chance to give my unscripted, unedited thoughts on all things pertaining to MMA and combat sports. So there's a lot to discuss. We might as well get right into it. This was an MMA-filled weekend. Oh, and cheers for everybody enjoying a nice big cup of coffee, just like me. Alright, so let's just go in chronological order. We had Bellator 223/Bellator London, which was an event with quite a few stories coming out of it. So let's get into that. Rafael Lovato Jr. defeated Gegard Mousasi in a very big upset. I was definitely one of those people expecting Mousasi to be too experienced and just more seasoned and well-rounded, which I thought would give Lovato a lot of problems. But I mean, Lovato did a great job. I mean, he won a majority decision. It was a close fight, but I still felt that it was, the fair decision. Will say, however, Mousasi did not look fantastic. I mean, he does have a kind of strange, almost nonchalant fighting style, which is, I mean, it's kind of a Mousasi staple, but overall, I don't know. I didn't feel it was Mousasi's best performance. Still, though, hats off to Rafael Lovato Jr. I'm kind of expecting a rematch here between Mousasi and Lovato Jr. It would not surprise me if that happened. Then we had Melvin Manhoff versus Kent Kaupinen. Melvin Manhoff won by decision. I also thought that he was going to win that fight, but it did not come easily. Kaupinen had Manhoff rocked and hurt, and I believe it was the first round. In the end, Manhoff, he showed his experience, why he's a veteran, and he came out on top, winning 29-28 across the boards. Aaron Chalmers defeated Fred Freeman, also as I kind of expected. Got it done by a submission, by a triangle choke. And then we had Paul Daly versus Eric Silva, which, contrary to what I thought, actually did go to a decision. I was pretty sure that it was going to be a finish, but, MMA, it's a crazy game. The more you know, the less you know. Good, exciting fight for the most part. Had James Gallagher defeating Jeremiah Labiano via decision, also 29-28 across the boards there. We had Fabian Edwards defeating Jonathan Bosuku, also by decision, winning all 3 rounds. So, a convincing effort against a kind of underrated fighter in Bosuku. Costello Van Steenis ended up coming out on top over Mike Shipman, again, just kind of like I predicted. And Charlie Ward defeated Justin Moore by TKO. And those were, I guess, the biggest fights as such. We did get to see Oliver Renkamp, the Swedish former UFC fighter. He came out on top after defeating Walter Gahadza via submission, rear naked choke in the first round. Took a while to get. Renkamp was trying for quite a while to get that rear naked choke locked down. Gahadza had pretty decent defense, but in the end, it was just too much for Gahadza to fight back against. And I mean, he'd been defending the choke for like the majority of a round, so I'm not that surprised that he ended up succumbing to a choke. Hopefully, we'll see Renkamp again soon. I know personally that he's really been itching to fight in Bellator and to fight as much as possible. So I really hope that a convincing performance like this will make sure that he gets some more fights. We know that Bellator have announced that they will be coming to Sweden sometime this year. My sources tell me it'll probably be towards the end part of the year. I mean, we're halfway through 2019 already. So, an overall good, entertaining card. Some fights that I definitely was not expecting to go to a decision that did, like with Manhoff and Paul Daly. But overall, a good event, and I'm very interested in seeing how Bellator move forward with the middleweight title, if they do give Mousasi a rematch or not. Then we had UFC Greenville, where Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie. Let's face it. I mean, he turned Greenville into Zombie Nation. I was surprised to see how much support was there for him. I mean, admittedly, I wasn't expecting a huge Brazilian turnout as such, but just the amount of Koreans and people with Korean flag and Korean Zombie shirts and stuff like that. I mean, he truly has transcended a different status in MMA. And he looked fantastic. He looked sharp, on point. I mean, there's not a lot to discuss in this fight. It was 58 seconds long. But I will say that from the get-go, he started out with a very solid leg kick. And once he landed that combination, the right-left, I mean, it was basically over there. Moicano, hats off to him. He did his absolute best to try and recover. And I felt that the ref let it go on just long enough to where, like, Moicano was kind of trying to get out of there, but then after taking a few more shots, just couldn't really defend himself. So good refereeing there. And Chan Sung Jung, I mean, he made it look easy, and it's after a performance like that, it's hard to think that he was actually the underdog when he just made it look as simple as he did. So this was his first fight since his devastating KO loss to Yair Rodriguez in November last year. Admittedly, though, that was a fantastic fight where Korean Zombie actually was winning every single round up until he got struck. But so he's won 2 out of his last 3 now, both of those wins by a first round KO. And I guess the downside is that, he's been away for such a long time. The last time we saw him before his comeback against Dennis Bermudez was in 2013 when he faced Jose Aldo for the UFC featherweight title. And that was ages ago. We got Max Holloway as the established king of the featherweight division. So things have definitely changed. And I mean, for me personally, I could see the Korean Zombie, provided he doesn't get stuck with any more injuries or anything like that. I can see him definitely doing a lot of damage in the division. If we check out the rankings real quick, Moicano, he was ranked at 5th place, whereas Chan Sung Jung was ranked at 12th place. And I do expect some very big change-ups after this. We did see that Jeremy Stevens openly challenged Chan Sung Jung. I'm down for that fight. I would say that it's a perfect main card fight or like co-main event for like a pay-per-view. I'm not sure, like, in regards to putting it as a main event at a fight night card. I mean, after his performance, you could definitely say that, like, Korean Zombie's performances speak for himself, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily the direction the UFC want to go. For me personally, like, if the UFC were to, say, return to South Korea or perhaps do a show in Asia, I think that would be a fantastic headlining fight. Otherwise, I would say put that on the main card for some upcoming UFC pay-per-view. And that's a fantastic co-main event, or just, yeah. I'm suffering really bad from pollen allergies, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm constantly sniveling. It sucks. You're basically allergic to summer. Alright, but I do expect Korean Zombie to move up quite a bit. Most likely overtake Moicano's place. If not, he will still be ranked around the top 5 to top 7. Stevens, where's he at? Top 7. So definitely some interesting fights to be made here. I am open to a Stevens fight. I think that would be a solid test. He's got a real intense fighting style. I mean, he's real gritty. I remember his comeback win over Dennis Bermudez, where he was losing a fight, then came out with a devastating knee that ended the fight. Aside from that, I mean, we've got Frankie Edgar challenging Max Holloway now for the title. We've got Alexander Volkanovski, who is very much campaigning for his title shot, and I mean rightfully so. So I would say Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie versus Jeremy Stephens. Yeah, why not? It's a fight that makes sense. I mean, you could do a rematch with Jose Aldo if you really want to sort of spearhead him towards title contention. Or even, I mean, Brian Ortega, he's ready to come back. We haven't seen him since he lost to Max Holloway. Again, another fantastic fight where he showed a lot of heart. Ortega would also be a very good fight for a Korean Zombie. I mean, it would definitely say a lot about where you put him in the, in the immediate future, if we actually do see Korean Zombie shoot the title contention again. Because the first time he did get it, it was kind of on, it was more sort of short notice stuff. Yeah, it was Anthony Pettis. That's who he was replacing. Yeah, Anthony Pettis was set to fight Jose Aldo for the UFC Featherweight Championship. Pettis was injured, and Korean Zombie stepped in. But I mean, Jung, he did suffer a dislocated shoulder in that fight. Admittedly, Jose Aldo also had some kind of a ankle injury, I believe. So there was some stuff sort of going against that fight and perhaps dampening it a little bit. But if we don't see Korean Zombie take on, say, like Ortega or Aldo, one of the top three guys, then I say, why not Jeremy Stephens? He's, an exciting fighter. The rest of the fights, I mean, like I said, leading up to this, there were good fights. There were interesting stories to be made of this, but not necessarily to a level where I would say that the mainstream fan really was wowed in that sense. So let's just go through the card in a bit of a quicker fashion. Randy Brown defeated Brian Barberena, third on TKO. Good showing from Brown. Barberena, I feel, is a very underrated fighter who, maybe it's just like his body type or his look, but people tend to count him out quite a bit. He's a solid fighter though, but he's falling now to his second straight loss after being knocked out by Vicente Luque. Before that, he defeated Jake Ellenberger by a TKO, and his biggest, one of his biggest wins ever. I mean, obviously the victory over Sage Northcutt and Worley Albus is also pretty impressive. We had Andre Ewell defeating Anderson Dos Santos. I loved the Michael Bisping comment where it was like, Anderson Dos Santos sounds like a name you get out of a Brazilian name generator. 10 points, Michael. 10 points for that comment. We had Andrea Lee defeating Montana De La Rosa. Also unanimous decision there. And Kevin Holland defeating Alessio De Chirico. Unanimous decision. That fight was pretty close. I know that there were some people who thought the call was controversial. There definitely seemed to be some boos when Kevin Holland was speaking at the mic, and some bad blood between the guys. Even after a fight, you don't see it very often. Usually, after a fight is over, the beef is over. That didn't really seem to be the case here. It was a close fight. There were small things that were done in scrambles and exchanges that may have tipped it in Holland's favor. I feel that, like, when I was waiting for a fight to end, I was kind of like, not really sure myself who won. It was one of those kind of fights. I was actually leaning a little bit more towards De Chirico, just like general spontaneous feelings afterwards. But it was one of those where I felt that he was robbed in any sense. Close fight. A lot of decisions on this card. 7 decisions out of 8, 9, 10, 11 fights. So, what else did we have? We had Ashley Yoder and Dan Ige win. Luis Pena, Violent Bob Ross, picks up his biggest win to date, defeating veteran Matt Wyman via bloody TKO, and we also had a record-setting win, the fastest win in UFC heavyweight history. Jairzinho Rozenstruik just demolished Alan Crowder, just dropped him with a first punch of a fight, and then followed up with some hard shots. Made it look easy. I told you guys beforehand, Yair Rozenstruik, he's a guy to keep an eye on. His ground game is probably his weakest aspect right now, but this guy has power in his shots, and I'm saying also exceptional power even for like a heavyweight. Most guys will not want to stand with this guy, and after his performance with such a quick knockout, I think that he definitely sort of put his name on a map. So I mean, honestly, I feel like him, Luis Pena, Randy Brown, and Chan Sung Jung definitely the biggest standouts of a card. Ariane Lipski, the Violence Queen, she was a champion in KSW in Poland, and there was a lot of buzz around her when she was going to make her UFC debut against Joanne Calderwood. She lost that by decision. Now she lost to Molly McCann, also by decision. She released a pretty long, heartfelt statement, which you can see on her Instagram page. It was, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a shame. She's a fighter who has the potential to be a real star, but just hasn't really found her way in the UFC. And, you know, we see that before. I mean, Hector Lombard was one of those guys that, you know, we thought was going to just take the UFC middleweight division by storm, and not, you know, he's got a losing record in the UFC. So, you know, you don't always know. So some of these stars and rising prospects, you know, they look like they're world beaters, but sometimes it's just a different game in the UFC. Moving on to Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship 6. We got to see a upset there as Artem Lobov, once again, like I told you, defeated Paulie Malignaggi via decision. It was a clear-cut clean sweep of 48-47. So, in other words, Lobov winning 3 rounds, Malignaggi winning 2. And it wasn't as violent, perhaps, or as intense of a fight as some people thought. Admittedly, I perhaps should have predicted that a little bit, but like a lot of times when they are this angry, it doesn't necessarily materialize with the same carelessness that we got to see with Lobov and Knight. Because with Lobov and Knight, there wasn't really bad blood as such. It was just 2 real warriors going at it. You know, they didn't need the bad blood. Sometimes with the bad blood, it can kind of like, you don't want to embarrass yourself against that guy. Like Rampage Jackson versus Rashad Evans comes to mind. Heated grudge match where, you know, it was just Rampage had that classic line like, it's gonna be black on black crime. It was a fight that we were looking forward to so badly, and it ended up being kind of an okay fight with not a whole lot happening in it, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was hardly a bad fight between Malignaggi and Lobov. Just a bit more technical than people thought. Malignaggi definitely did not, I mean, he definitely did not want to get into a dogfight with Lobov, just as predicted. I mean, he wants to keep it more clean, more technical. He claims that he broke his hand in the second round, then he showed up to the press conference with both his hands wrapped. Malignaggi kind of continued. He had the opportunity to sort of take this in a good way and sort of leave the antagonist stamp behind him. But he kind of didn't really do that. He said afterwards, I got pretty much the worst of everything because I got a shit decision and I made a tic-tac-toe board out of his face with my left hand. He also claims that he only got hit by 1 solid punch. For those who saw Paulie Malignaggi's face afterwards, it was pretty... I mean, unless Artem Lobov has fists the size of like ironing boards, I'm pretty sure that Malignaggi got hit with more than 1 solid punch. He also said, honestly, I'm not even kidding, I got hit with 1 clean punch all night. In that 1 clinch, I got hit with a couple of little good shots. In that 1 clinch, I think it was 2 little short shots he hit me with in one of the clinches, and that was it. I mean, otherwise it was like little grazing shots that hit my stomach or grazed my face. I thought I pretty much outboxed him the whole way. Come on, Paulie. Being gracious in defeat is one of the best things you can do. I don't mind him disputing the decision necessarily, because I do feel like there are some different criteria that come into play here. I do feel that MMAnytt was definitely fighting the way that he would have done in a traditional boxing match, but it seems like sort of like aggression and ring control, I guess the boxing equivalent of octagon control, are weighed a little bit heavier in bare knuckle. That there is a sense of aggression scoring more points, and MMAnytt, he was very defensive in this fight. I feel like he was constantly pedaling backwards, and not doing a whole lot more than he had quite a few solid jabs, but I just feel like Lobov was definitely the one on the offense, which, let's be clear, being on the offense doesn't always mean you're winning. I mean, look at Lyoto Machida, one of the finest counter strikers in the sport, who often will knock his opponents out going backwards, like he did against Chael Sonnen, like he did against Ryan Bader. That being said, though, I don't feel like MMAnytt was countering all that efficiently, and yeah, I mean, like I said, if he wants to dispute the decision, that's completely fine. That's his right. But I mean, when you go out and say just lies, because that's what it is. These are flat out lies. Watch the highlights, the replay. We see that he gets hit with quite a few good shots, and unless his face is made of paper, you need solid shots to open up cuts in your face. Maybe this wasn't meant to be, said MMAnytt after a fight. A lot of people in boxing said, you shouldn't do this, you're a 2-time world champion, this is beneath you. So it's like the most backhanded sort of like, he lifts himself up while also putting down the organization he just fought for. I don't know, I mean, he was definitely respectful after a fight towards Artem. I mean, he didn't say anything bad to Artem afterwards. But I don't know, it's just, he seems like a bit of a sore loser here, to be honest. It obviously did not go the way he planned. He probably knows he's gonna get a lot of ridicule for this in the coming years even. I mean, hell, like, I think it was Michael Bisping who said, like, people still to this day will send him screenshots of him getting knocked out by Dan Henderson. So, I mean, I'm expecting MMAnytt to deal with this loss for a long ass time. Then we had a couple other noteworthy fights here. Dakota Cochrane, who took the fight with Chris Lieben on short notice, actually ended up winning 49-46, 49-46, and 48-47. It was, yeah, I mean, Chris Lieben, he said beforehand that, Dakota Cochrane's sort of like, he's got some intense starts to his fights. And, this was a fight where I also felt that Lieben didn't really get going. He couldn't really find his rhythm. It just felt like he was a little bit off in many of the exchanges. We may very well actually speak to Lieben later on this week. He's a friend of MMAnytt, so we might touch a little bit more on that later on. But big win for Dakota Cochrane, who fought a smart fight, and it paid off. Johnny Bedford defeated Reggie Barnett Jr. by unanimous decision to win the lightweight title in BKFC. It was 47-45, 47-45, and 48-44. I mean, big for MMA because obviously for those who saw the pre-fight press conference, it was kind of like an intense, there was a lot of heat between Bedford and Barnett Jr. Julian Lane, aka Let Me Bang Bro, defeated Tom Schoaf. Joey Beltran knocked out Jamie Campbell. And Joe Riggs got defeated by Walter Barros. Jim Ehlers, also former UFC fighter, defeated Elvin Brito via knockout. And yeah, those are, I guess, the most noteworthy names as such. So I don't know. I mean, I talked a little bit before about how Bare Knuckle FC is kind of like something that I'm like a little bit not necessarily ashamed, but not directly proud to be following. I don't know. The more I see it, it's kind of warming up on me. Like it's different. It's got definitely a different feel to it. It does feel a little grittier in many ways, but I mean, how they put in a lot of interesting, fun fights. I think this event in particular maybe had a few more decisions than they were planning on, and it was perhaps not as explosive as some of the fights could have been. But overall, though, I mean, they're doing the right numbers. I was listening to John Morgan's MMA Roadshow podcast, and he was talking about how the numbers that Paulie and Artem Lobo have been doing have been great. That a lot of times people have been clicking on that stuff a lot more than the UFC and Bellator shows, which says a lot. I mean, this is their 6th event, and they're already doing fantastic traffic. I know that we've been getting a lot of hits as well on our site, and I mean, you're playing the game right. I mean, say what you will about Bare Knuckle in general, or say what you will about their production or whatever. They're doing something right, obviously. And now, is that something just spectacle? Not only, but it's definitely a big part of it. I mean, had this just been some run-of-the-mill boxing organization starting up, there's no way they would have gotten as much attention. So Bare Knuckle definitely is something that intrigues people, and it could be because it's got that grittier feel in general. So now the news do not stop there. Just recently written up here on MMAnytts. Henry Cejudo takes aim at boxing champ Vasyl Lomachenko and gets a response. So I guess we're in the money era of fights in many ways. It all started with Conor and Floyd Mayweather. Obviously, that was again a fight that sort of transcended MMA and probably combat sports in general. It became the biggest thing ever. I remember I had like friends and people contacting me about it who like weren't really combat sports fans or anything like that. So then, I mean, we're getting these super fights now in the UFC, champion versus champion, and I mean, Henry Cejudo, he's also someone who he's just, again, you can say what you will, he's doing a lot of stuff right. He may be the king of cringe. I'm not sure if I would agree that cringe is the new cool, despite how much I'm sure he wants that stuff to get hashtagged. But I mean, if you just look at his fights alone, there's no way you can dispute that Cejudo's doing something right. I mean, Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, and then Marlon Moraes. He's looked great. He's just looked really great, aside from that first round against Marlon Moraes, which he lost very handily, and the first round against Demetrius Johnson. But I mean, despite that, he's looked fantastic. The adjustments that he made between rounds 1 and 2 against Marlon Moraes were very telling of his fight IQ and the way he can adapt to different situations in fights. So he sets forth a challenge here to Vasyl Lomachenko, who, if you're more on the MMA side of things, Vasyl Lomachenko, he is a Ukrainian boxer who, he looks like he's straight out of a Matrix sequel with the way that he moves. He's got fantastic movement, fantastic footwork. His counters are just beautiful to watch. I'm sure there's There's highlights on YouTube that you can check out, which I highly recommend. I spoke with Swedish world champion boxer Sven Fulding, who said that like what Lomachenko is doing is like the future of boxing, really. And it's just a joy to watch, so highly recommend anything there. So Cejudo took to Twitter to write, Artem Lobov, 13-15 in MMA, former UFC fighter, wins by unanimous victory over Paulie Malignaggi, 36-8 in boxing, former boxing world champion. What do you think an Olympic and UFC champ would do to boxing's Vasyl Lomachenko? Loma answers, here's an example of how it will be, showing one of his battered opponents. And Cejudo then responds with, we all know what happened the last time you fought a Mexican warrior whose hand got raised again, ? And yeah, Mexican flag, because he is referring to Orlando Salido, who is Lomachenko's first and so far only loss. He lost by a split decision, and Salido is Mexican. So do not expect anything to happen here, though. This is perhaps a good way for Cejudo to raise his stock, become more of a mainstream household name. But I can't see any scenario where these two ever fight. As of right now, Cejudo's got way too many obligations in the UFC. Not only does he have 2 titles to defend, but he will be away on injury or on recovery, as he had a shoulder injury which was recently operated, and he's expected to be out I think it was 4 to 5 months before he can actually properly train again. So we can't really expect to see Cejudo back in the octagon in 2019, meaning that there's going to be a pretty long line of people waiting to challenge for both the flyweight and the bantamweight titles. Then at bantamweight, we've got a lot of fighters who are lining up. I mean, we know that Peter Yan, the Russian sensation, ranked at 4th place, has suggested a interim title bout with Aljamain Sterling, who is at number 2. And considering the fact that Cejudo will be out at least until next year, this is one of few situations where I feel that an interim title is the thing that makes most sense. Because a lot of times I can kind of feel like it's not necessary. I mean, I love the fight between Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway, and I thought it was a fantastic fight. I don't necessarily think it needed to be for the interim title. I mean, we all kind of knew that Khabib was going to be away and when exactly he was going to return. So, and I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying, like, I feel that Peter Yan versus Aljamain Sterling is like a much more logical thing. I mean, I think obviously a lot of us thought that like Dustin Poirier versus Tony Ferguson would perhaps be the interim title fight. But this is one where this truly is the 2 most deserving guys in the division. Aljamain Sterling was coming off of a win over Pedro Munoz, whereas Peter Yan defeated Jimmy Rivera in a very convincing fashion. I've been hot on Peter Yan for a long time. Me and him actually have a little bit of contact via Instagram. We've done some short interviews together. Nice guy, very very calculated. He kind of knows what he's doing. He thinks ahead, and I mean, when you look at his fighting style, it's just it takes a lot to take me out of a sort of analyst experience and put me into the straight up fan experience. I mean, a crazy knockout or a crazy rock'em sock'em robots kind of slugfest will definitely do that. But Peter Yan, when he fights, there's just something about his technique and his fighting style that just makes me just a fan, right? Again, I'm just sitting there just overjoyed at what I'm witnessing. And I think he defeats Aljamain Sterling if they do decide to make that fight, which I hope they do. So that was, a little rundown. See how we're doing on time here. It's actually not that bad. But so yeah, that was a little rundown of some of the recent events. There will be more stories, obviously, coming up on MMAnytt.com and on MMAnytt.se shortly. We've got our guy Stefan Rumare, who's been covering the World Championships in amateur MMA in Italy. And we do have some fun stuff to look forward to in the coming days and weeks as well. This pollen, his allergies are just kicking my ass. I mean, 30-27 across the boards here. So this weekend we got UFC and ESPN, Francis Ngannou versus Junior Dos Santos. That is actually looking like a very fun fight. Alright, so this is, in my opinion, a much stronger card, and this is where we've got Josier Formiga versus Joseph Benavidez, where I feel that if Benavidez wins that fight, you can make a credible case for him challenging for a flyweight title. But yeah, that was my rundown, my thoughts on the events that happened this weekend, UFC, Bellator, and BKFC, as well as some of the fallout from that. Will we see Chan Sung Jung versus Jeremy Stevens? I kinda hope we do. So yeah, I'm Sebastian Vendel-Martinez. We hope you enjoyed the second installment of MMAnytts Real Talk. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We did get some comments on our previous videos, some nice, some not so nice, but that's the internet. It's a game we play. So yeah, thank you for staying tuned, and we will catch you guys next time.